The first sign something was wrong wasn't the pink envelope. It was the silence that fell across the table when the waiter poured my wine. Romano's was alive that night, silverware chiming against porcelain, laughter from couples 2 glasses too deep, a violinist threading soft melodies between courses. But at our table, the 3 people I trusted most stared at me like actors waiting for their cue. My wife, Elena, sat across from me in a black dress I hadn't seen in years. It clung to her like it was meant for someone else's eyes. She kept her phone angled against the water glass, the camera pointed squarely at me. To her right, her brother Tom leaned back in his chair, twirling the face of his watch like he was timing a race. And beside him, my mother-in-law, Vivian, draped in jewelry and disdain, held a small pink envelope like it was a weapon. "Happy 38th, David," she said, her smile painted and poisonous. She slid the envelope across the white tablecloth with manicured fingers. "From all of us." For 8 years, I'd endured her passive-aggressive barbs, her raised eyebrows at my blue-collar hands, her whispered comments about how Elena married down. But that night, I saw something new in her eyes, triumph. I picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. Elena's lips curved into a thin line. The kind of smile people wear when they know the punchline and you don't. "Go on," she said softly. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from anticipation. I slid a finger beneath the flap and unfolded the contents. The restaurant clamor faded into a hollow roar as I scanned the pages. Divorce papers. Every line filled, every sticky note marked, every section highlighted in yellow as if I might miss what they wanted me to see. Property. Accounts. My company. Even the house I'd built brick by brick with overtime pay and sleepless nights. Vivian leaned forward, chin high. "It's all in order. All you need to do is sign." Tom smirked, resting an elbow on the table. "Consider it a birthday gift. Freedom." Elena's phone caught the light as it recorded, and I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was theater. They wanted my humiliation on camera, a neat little clip to show a judge, proof that I was unstable when confronted. My hand tightened around the pen I always carried. A Mont Blanc, polished black with silver trim. A gift from Elena on our first anniversary. For building our future, she'd said. I remembered how proud she'd been when she handed it to me, how certain she looked that we were a team. That certainty was gone. I placed the papers neatly in front of me, uncapped the pen, and began to sign. One stroke after another, steady, deliberate. I signed as if I were authorizing a shipment, approving an invoice, closing a deal. When I finished, I set the pen down with care and pushed the stack back toward Elena. "Thank you," I said evenly. "This is exactly what I needed." The words landed like a hammer. Elena's hand twitched, nearly knocking over her wineglass. Vivian's face cracked, confusion spilling through her polished mask. Tom froze mid-smirk. I reached for my wallet, laid 3 crisp $100 bills on the table, enough to cover the meal they'd ordered to celebrate my downfall, and stood. "Enjoy the show," I said, tapping Elena's phone gently with my finger. "You'll want to keep that recording." And then I left. The valet hurried to bring my truck around, apologizing for the delay. I tipped him $50 and slid behind the wheel, the night air sharp in my lungs. For a moment, I stared at the glow of Romano's behind me. Through the window, I could see Elena gesturing wildly, Vivian clutching her pearls, Tom jabbing at his phone like he was dialing reinforcements. They thought they'd ended me. They thought humiliation would be the start of their new chapter. What they didn't know was that I'd already started writing my own. Because betrayals don't happen in a vacuum. They leave fingerprints. Phone calls at midnight. Whispered meetings. Credit card charges at hotels 2 cities away. And 3 days earlier, by accident, I'd seen enough to know something was coming. So while Elena and her family plotted a spectacle, I had been making quiet arrangements of my own. And now? Now the stage they built for my destruction was about to become the stage for theirs. The drive home should have been a blur, but every detail carved itself into memory: the hum of the tires on wet asphalt, The faint jazz on the radio that I couldn't bring myself to turn off, the way the valet's $50 bills still smelled of cologne. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but inside, something jagged had splintered. 8 years. 8 years of late-night takeout meals while I built a company from nothing. 8 years of paying off Elena's student loans without complaint, of smiling through Vivian's venom-laced compliments, of bailing Tom out when his business ventures fell apart. And this was the reward. I pulled into the driveway of the house we'd called ours, a modest 2-story brick with a maple tree out front. The porch light glowed, warm and domestic, as though nothing had changed. I almost let myself believe that I'd step inside to find Elena waiting, wine open, birthday candles flickering on a cake she'd baked. But when I unlocked the door, the house felt foreign. The laughter of strangers clung to the air, fading echoes of a life I no longer owned. I set my keys on the counter, leaned against it, and tried to breathe. The envelope's weight still pressed against my chest even though I'd left it behind. Divorce papers. Highlighted sections. A phone camera recording my downfall. It was the kind of betrayal you couldn't script better in a movie. The anger came slow, not fiery but cold, creeping like frost through the edges of my thoughts. I wasn't surprised she wanted out. I was surprised at the performance. At how much work they'd put into breaking me down in public. Theatrics, strategy, coordination. This wasn't a decision, it was an operation. And operations leave evidence. I opened the cabinet where we kept the whiskey, poured 2 fingers into a glass, and sank onto the couch. For the first time that night, I let myself think about the details. The phone calls Elena had been taking in the kitchen late at night, voice low but urgent. The sudden interest in expensive clothes, the weekend trips with coworkers, the way her smiles for me had turned brittle months ago. She hadn't been hiding well. I just hadn't wanted to look. The whiskey burned down my throat, and I reached for my phone. A name stared back at me from recent calls, Malik. My old army buddy. Bartender, confidant, the kind of man who'd seen the worst of people and still managed to laugh about it. If there was one person who'd understand what I was about to say, it was him. I hit dial. Chun? His voice was groggy, heavy with sleep. You realize it's past midnight? Malik, I said, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazy circles. I think my marriage just detonated. There was silence on the other end, then the sound of sheets rustling as he sat up. Talk. So I told him, about the restaurant, the papers, the phone camera, Vivian's smirk, Tom's watch, all of it. I didn't raise my voice once. I laid it out like an after-action report, cold and methodical. When I finished, there was another long silence. Damn, Malik finally said. They tried to set you up like a mark in a con. Yeah. And you signed the papers? Every page. A low whistle. You always were better at poker than people gave you credit for. I closed my eyes. They think they've buried me. Malik's voice sharpened. So what's the play? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the living room, the wedding photos, the framed vacation snapshots, the sofa Elena had insisted on buying despite the cost. All of it suddenly looked like props on a stage. The play, I said slowly, is to make sure when their curtain falls, I'm the one holding the spotlight. Malik chuckled, but there was no humor in it. That's the David I remember. You want backup? Not yet, I said. First I need clarity. I need to know how deep this runs. The silence stretched again, but this time it was a companionable one. Malik didn't press. He didn't need to. He knew me well enough to hear the steel sliding into place beneath the calm. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the house dark around me. A part of me wanted to storm into the bedroom, wake Elena, demand explanations. But explanations weren't worth anything. Evidence was. And evidence was what I intended to collect. When I finally rose, it wasn't with the sluggish drag of defeat, it was with the deliberate motion of someone preparing for a campaign. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink, rinsed the glass, and opened my laptop. Passwords. Accounts. shared drives. I knew where Elena kept her files, and I knew she thought I never touched them. But she'd forgotten that logistics is the art of tracking, whether it's cargo across states or secrets across hard drives. By the time dawn broke pale against the blinds, I had copied more than enough to confirm what my gut already knew. Hidden messages. Travel itineraries. A name that appeared again and again, Richard Morrison. The boss. The lover. The reason my wife had turned my birthday into a stage play. I sat back, the glow of the screen hard on my eyes, and let the name settle in my mind like the first move on a chessboard. Richard. Every betrayal has an architect. And now I knew mine. 3 nights after the birthday ambush, I came home earlier than usual. Not because I wanted to, but because something in my gut told me to. The house was dark except for a soft glow from the living room. I stepped inside quietly, keys still in hand, and froze when I heard voices. Elena's laugh, sharp, brittle, floated out first. Then another voice, smooth and cold, one I knew too well. Vivian. I should have walked straight in. Confronted them. Demanded answers. Instead, I stayed in the hallway, half in shadow, listening. David's such an idiot, Elena said, her tone dripping with contempt. He has no idea what's coming. My grip on the keys tightened until the jagged edges bit into my palm. Half his assets, Elena, Vivian replied, calm, calculating. The business, the house, the accounts. Everything. And Richard promises Paris once this is all over. Richard. The name burned. The boss. The lover. The man I'd found in Elena's emails at 4 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Hearing his name from her lips was different, though. It was confirmation spoken into the air, undeniable. I leaned against the wall, my breath shallow, as Elena's voice softened. I can't wait to see his face when we serve him the papers. Tom's going to film the whole thing. We'll use it in court, show how unstable he is. Brilliant, Vivian purred. That boy never deserved you anyway. Blue-collar trash with delusions of grandeur. Richard can give you the life you actually deserve. Blue-collar trash. The words sliced through me harder than the divorce papers ever could. For 8 years, I'd been her provider, her partner, her anchor. Now, I was nothing more than a stepping stone she was eager to crush. I backed out of the house quietly, heart pounding but face calm. I didn't slam doors, didn't shout, didn't let them know I'd heard. Rage begged me to explode, but another part of me, the soldier part, the planner, was louder. Explosions burn bright and fade fast. Plans cut deeper. I drove without direction until the familiar neon glow of Murphy's bar pulled me in. The place smelled like smoke and spilled beer, the kind of dive where broken men came to forget themselves. Malik was behind the counter, polishing glasses. His eyes met mine, and he didn't even need to ask. You look like someone ran over your dog, he muttered, sliding a whiskey across the scarred wood. What happened? I told him. Not in a rush, not shouting, just laying it out like I used to debrief after missions overseas. The laughter in the living room, Vivian's sneer, Richard's name, the plan to record me like I was some circus act. Malik listened, jaw tightening, pouring me another drink before the first was half gone. When I finished, he leaned in. So, what's the play? I don't know yet, I admitted, my voice steady even as my chest burned. But if they want to ambush me, if they want to film my humiliation, fine. We'll give them a show they'll never forget. Malik's grin spread slow and dangerous. Now you're talking. He pulled out his phone, tapped a number, and spoke low into the receiver. I know a guy. He owes me a favor. Give us 24 hours. The whiskey blurred my thoughts, but one word cut through clear. 24 hours. That was all I needed. By the next evening, Malik's PI had delivered. A thick envelope sat on the bar, full of photographs, receipts, timelines. Proof. Richard Morrison, age 45. Married. 2 kids. Senior partner at a marketing firm. He'd been with Elena for 8 months, hotels, weekend trips, even a Paris getaway booked for next week. And the real kicker? His wife, Catherine Morrison, was a divorce attorney known for gutting cheaters in courtrooms like a butcher at a slaughterhouse. They weren't just cheating, Malik said grimly. They were building a case against you. Tom's been digging up financial records. Vivian's been photographing documents. They want everything. I flipped through the photos, my pulse steady. Elena with Richard at a hotel. Elena with Richard at a restaurant. Elena with Richard in a car that wasn't hers. Each image drove the knife deeper, but each also sharpened my resolve. They haven't just betrayed me, I said slowly. They've declared war. Malik nodded. So what's your move? I stared at a photo of Elena holding Richard's hand, her smile wide and free in a way it hadn't been in years. My wife, my partner, was a stranger. And strangers could be dealt with. I want to disappear, I said finally. Legally. Financially. Completely. Strip myself bare until I'm worth nothing they can touch. And then, I slid the photo back into the envelope. Then I want to watch their world burn. Malik exhaled, long and low, before lifting his glass. To scorched earth. I clinked mine against his. To scorched earth. In that moment, the grief, the shock, the heartbreak, they all fell away. What remained was something colder, sharper. I wasn't a husband anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was a strategist. And they just handed me my war map. The next 48 hours blurred into a storm of phone calls, documents, and decisions that couldn't be undone. I sat in Janet Pierce's office at dawn, the blinds barely open, her desk already stacked with files. She was sharp-eyed, hair pulled back tight, a woman who knew the cost of betrayal because she'd paid it herself in her own divorce. You want to transfer everything? She asked, flipping through the papers I'd handed her. Business, house, accounts? Yes, I said. All of it. Into a trust. My niece Jessica as beneficiary. Janet raised an eyebrow. Elena doesn't know she exists, does she? I shook my head. She doesn't know half my family. Kept them separate because they weren't polished enough for her world. Janet smirked, the kind of smile you only earn from seeing schemes backfire. That may be the smartest decision you ever made. Her pen scratched across the documents like a knife cutting through rope. By the time I walked out of her office, my 8 years of work, sweat, and sacrifice were out of Elena's reach. I was worth exactly what I had when we got married, a battered pickup truck and $50,000 in savings. It should have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like freedom. That night, I installed cameras in corners Elena would never notice, tucked away like shadows. I copied her emails, her texts, every file I could scrape from her laptop. The woman who called me blue-collar trash never realized the man she underestimated had built his empire on logistics, on tracking, recording, and control. Each file was a blade I was sharpening. Each hidden recording a fuse waiting to be lit. But beneath the planning, a different weight pressed against my chest. I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at a framed photo of our wedding day. Elena's eyes, once bright with possibility, now looked like the eyes of a stranger. Had she ever really loved me? Or was I always just a stepping stone, a man to build stability until she found something shinier? The thought cut deeper than any legal blow. I poured myself a glass of water and forced it down, but it did nothing to wash away the bitterness. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was survival. The following morning, I walked into my warehouse. The hum of forklifts, the clang of metal, the rhythm of an operation running on precision, it all steadied me. 47 employees depended on me. Families ate because of what I'd built. I couldn't let Elena and her family reduce this place to ashes. Jessica spotted me first from the mezzanine office. She was 25, sharp-eyed, her father's calculating mind in her mother's determined frame. She hurried down the stairs with a stack of reports. Uncle David, she said, her voice low. The transfers went through. You don't own the company anymore. I do. Her words hit harder than I expected. My company, our company, was no longer mine. You sure you're ready for this? I asked. Jessica's eyes hardened. I've been ready for 2 years. You just didn't tell me why. A slow smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. She had the same fire I'd once had. Maybe still did. Good, I said. Because this isn't just about protecting what's ours. It's about making sure they understand what happens when they come for us. Jessica nodded. So what happens when they find out? That, I said, glancing toward the security cameras, is when things get interesting. By noon, Elena appeared. I watched from my office as she stormed across the loading dock in her heels, completely out of place amid steel beams and pallet jacks. She barked at Maria, my assistant, demanding to see me. Her voice carried even through the monitors. Sharp. Angry. Desperate. I told Maria to let her in. When Elena walked into my office, her face was flushed, her hands trembling. What the hell do you think you're doing? She spat. Working, I said calmly, not looking up from my screen. Don't play games with me. You signed the papers, but you can't just walk away. We have assets to divide, arrangements. What assets? I interrupted. Her mouth opened, then closed. The house. The business. Your accounts. All of it. I finally looked up, letting her see the calm in my eyes. I read the papers, Elena. You get half of what I had when we married. Congratulations, you're entitled to 25 grand and a truck with a broken air conditioner. Her face went pale. What did you do? What you never thought I was capable of, I said. She sank into the chair opposite me, the weight of reality crashing over her. For the first time, I saw cracks in her confidence. Not anger. Not superiority. Fear. You can't do this, she whispered. I already did, I said. But don't worry. Richard will keep you warm in Paris. The name hit her like a slap. Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling. How do you? I know everything, Elena. The late nights. The lies. The plans. You wanted to see me broken? You should have remembered who I was before you met me. I don't break. I rebuild. Stronger. Her tears slid down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. Not pity. Not regret. Just a cold certainty. Because this was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about ending a war. And the battlefield was finally set. The warehouse was louder than usual that morning, but not because of machinery. The sound was human, voices hushed, whispers carrying from loading docks to break rooms. Everyone knew something was coming. You could feel it in the air, electric and heavy, the way soldiers sense the moment before the firefight begins. I didn't make them wait long. Elena arrived first, storming across the concrete floor with Vivian at her side and Tom lumbering behind like a bodyguard. All three moved with the same rigid determination, as though they'd rehearsed this scene in front of a mirror. Maria tried to block their way, but I told her to let them through. Let them come to me. I stepped down from my office platform into the warehouse proper, where 47 employees had gathered within earshot. Forklifts idled. Pallets sat abandoned. The air went still. David! Elena called, her voice echoing off steel walls. We need to talk. I raised a hand to quiet the murmurs and faced them under the bright industrial lights. What can I do for you folks? You can stop this nonsense, Vivian snapped. She was dressed like royalty for war, pearls, diamonds, the sharp scent of perfume. Elena is your wife. You have responsibilities. She was my wife. I corrected evenly. Until 3 weeks ago. You think you're clever, moving assets around, Tom said, his jaw tight. That's fraud. Illegal. We'll take you to court. I smiled faintly. By all means. I'm sure a judge would love to hear about how you ambushed me on my birthday with divorce papers. Or how you planned to film me for evidence. Or how you, Vivian, illegally accessed my financial records. Tom's bravado cracked for the briefest moment. He glanced at his mother, then at Elena, as if searching for a script that wasn't there. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling. David, we built a life together. You can't just walk away from that. I let her words hang. The silence in the warehouse grew so thick you could feel it press against your chest. Then I answered, voice low but clear enough to carry. No. I built a life. You lived in it while planning to burn it down. Her lip quivered. I made mistakes. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. You made choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to call me trash. You chose to plot with your family to take everything I'd worked for. Those weren't mistakes, Elena. They were decisions. Her tears spilled. The sight should have gutted me. Once it would have. But the man she'd married was gone. What stood here now was someone she'd created with her betrayal. So what happens now? She whispered. I stepped closer, every eye in the warehouse fixed on us. Now you live with the consequences. Just like I am. Her voice broke. We can fix this. Please. I'll end it with Richard. We'll go to counseling. The mention of his name pulled laughter from somewhere deep in my chest, a sound colder than anything I'd ever heard from myself. Richard won't be ending anything with you. He's already got problems of his own. The words hit harder than any fist. Elena's knees seemed to weaken. She looked from me to Vivian to Tom, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. Tom tried to salvage the moment, stepping forward, puffed up with false courage. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said, turning so the entire warehouse could hear. If any of you ever threaten me again, if you show up at my home, my business, or near my people, I will bury you in court with every recording, every file, every piece of evidence I've collected. And trust me, there's more than enough. The warehouse had gone silent. My employees, my family in all but blood, were watching, recording, bearing witness. Vivian, for once, said nothing. Her face was pale, her jewels suddenly looking cheap under the fluorescent lights. Elena sobbed openly now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. But I didn't reach for her. Didn't comfort her. Didn't even flinch. This was the reckoning. And it was hers. Get out, I said softly. All of you. And don't come back. They hesitated for a heartbeat, but then they turned, first Tom, then Vivian, finally Elena, whose last glance over her shoulder was not anger, not even hate, but something worse. Defeat. I stood there, shoulders squared, the weight of every eye on me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to release. Not victory. Not yet. But the war had turned. And the enemy knew it. The warehouse confrontation should have been the end. Elena broken. Vivian silenced. Tom humiliated. But endings rarely arrive when you expect them. 3 days later, Catherine Morrison walked into Murphy's. She didn't belong there. Pearls and confidence in a dive bar that smelled like smoke and regret. Malik arched an eyebrow, but he said nothing as she took the stool beside me. Mr. Chin, she said, voice cool and precise. We need to talk. I studied her. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. A woman who had already decided the outcome before she entered the room. What could Richard's wife possibly want with me? I asked. Ex-wife, she corrected smoothly. The papers are already filed. But don't flatter yourself, this isn't about him. It's about her. She slid a manila envelope across the counter. Inside were photographs, receipts, emails. Elena and Richard captured in moments they thought were private. You've been documenting them? I asked. For months, Catherine said. I wanted enough evidence to gut Richard in court. But your wife. She paused, smiling faintly. Your ex-wife has been useful to me too. She moved his money. She signed things she shouldn't have. Which means, to the right authorities, she isn't just a mistress. She's an accomplice. The words hung in the stale air like a noose. What do you want from me? Nothing illegal, Catherine said, her tone too polished to trust. Just details. Elena's passport number. Her travel plans. Copies of her records. If I have those, the French authorities will be waiting when she and Richard land for their little Paris holiday. Beside me, Malik shifted. His eyes said what I was thinking: this woman is dangerous. I closed the envelope, fingers pressing against the cardboard like it might burn me. And what happens to Elena? Catherine's smile sharpened. Fraud charges. Extradition proceedings. Years of her life drowned in legal battles. I'll take Richard's fortune. The law will take her freedom. And you. She tilted her head, studying me. You'll have what you wanted. Justice. Justice. The word tasted bitter. She stood, adjusting her jacket. Think quickly, Mr. Chen. Their flight leaves tomorrow night. And then she was gone, leaving the scent of expensive perfume behind, clashing with the staleness of the bar. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment with the envelope open on the table, staring at Elena's smile in photo after photo. The same smile she'd once given me, before it belonged to another man. Malik poured us both whiskey. You're not seriously considering helping her, he muttered. She betrayed me, I said, my voice low. She tried to take everything. She deserves. But the words faltered. Because beneath the anger, beneath the cold strategy, I still felt the echo of what we once were. And that echo hurt worse than the betrayal itself. She deserves consequences, Malik said firmly. Not mercy. Don't forget what they did. I closed the envelope and slid it into my desk drawer. The next evening, as Air France 447 lifted off from O'Hare with Elena and Richard on board, I sat in the dark, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop. My finger hovered over the send button, the one that would deliver her passport number and travel records to Catherine's contacts. One click, and Elena's life would unravel. But in the silence of that moment, another truth settled in. Helping Catherine wouldn't free me. It wouldn't give me back what I'd lost. It would only make me like them, calculating, ruthless, feeding on ruin. I closed the laptop without pressing send. Some wars aren't won by striking back harder. Some are won by refusing to play the game at all. The next morning, Jessica called me from the warehouse. They came, she said, her voice tense. Federal agents. Warrant in hand. Looking for financial records tied to Morrison's accounts. My stomach sank. Catherine hadn't needed my help. She'd already set the pieces in motion, and I was her convenient scapegoat. As the agents boxed up files, Jessica's voice crackled through the line. Uncle David, what do we do? I looked out over the city, the skyline sharp against the morning sun. For weeks, I had lived in reaction, responding to Elena's betrayal, Vivian's scheming, Tom's threats. But this was different. This was bigger. Call Janet, I said finally, my voice steady. We fight. From this moment forward we fight. That night, I sat alone by the window, city lights glittering below. Somewhere across the ocean, Elena and Richard were learning what betrayal costs when the law comes knocking. Somewhere across town, Catherine Morrison was raising a glass to her victory. And here I was, stripped of everything but resolve. Elena once asked me what I looked like when I was truly angry. Now she was about to find out.